A woman lies on a narrow bed in a locked room in Montreal. She has been asleep, or something like asleep, for weeks. Speakers hum in the walls. The same voice, over and over, saying the same short sentence thousands of times into the fog of her drugged mind. When they finally wake her, she does not know her own name. She does not know she has children. She has forgotten how to use a toilet, how to dress herself, how to recognize her husband's face across a room. She checked in for anxiety, and the man who did this to her wasn't a criminal hiding in a basement. He was one of the most respected psychiatrists in the world, and someone was paying him very well for the results. This is the story of a hospital that tried to erase people down to nothing, then build something new in the empty space. The place is the Allen Memorial Institute, the psychiatric wing attached to McGill University in Montreal. In the late 1950s, it was the kind of place a family doctor sent you when your nerves were bad, when the sadness after childbirth wouldn't lift, when you needed the best care money could find. At the top of it sat Dr. Donald Ewan Cameron, a Scottish-born psychiatrist with a towering reputation. He had helped assess Nazi leaders at Nuremberg. He was president of the Canadian Psychiatric Association, and later the American one, and eventually the World Psychiatric Association. When Cameron spoke, the field listened, and he had an idea, a big one. He believed mental illness came from patterns of thought worn into a person like grooves in a record. His theory was simple and terrible. If you could wipe those grooves clean, erase the sick mind entirely, you could then record a healthy one over the blank surface. He wasn't going to treat the patient, he was going to delete them and start over. To do that kind of work, you need money, and the money that found its way to Montreal did not arrive with a return address. This was the height of the Cold War, and American intelligence was terrified. There were rumors that the Soviets and the Chinese had cracked something, a way to break a human mind and rebuild it, to make a man confess to anything, to make a loyal citizen into a puppet. The CIA wanted that power for itself. Their umbrella program for chasing it had a name that would later become infamous: mkultra. But you can't have the CIA cutting checks to a Canadian hospital, so they built a shell, a pleasant, forgettable name on the letterhead: the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology, a supposed private foundation handing out grants to serious researchers. Cameron applied. Cameron received. The specific piece of the program that flowed to him was cataloged in the files as Subproject 68. And here is the cold, clever heart of it. The cover-up wasn't something they bolted on afterward to hide the damage. It was built into the money from the very first dollar. The layers designed so that if anyone ever pulled the thread, it would come apart in their hands. It's entirely possible that Cameron himself never knew whose money was really writing his checks. The patients on those beds certainly never knew. They thought they were being healed. What was actually being done to them had a clinical name. Cameron called the first stage depatterning. In ordinary psychiatry of that era, electroshock was used sparingly. A patient might receive a handful of treatments. Cameron threw that rulebook out. He delivered the shocks at many times the standard intensity, and instead of once, he ran his patients through it again and again, day after day, sometimes twice a day, for weeks. The goal was not to lift depression. The goal was demolition. Patients would begin to slip. First, the recent memories went. What they'd eaten, what day it was. Then it went deeper. They forgot the names of their spouses. They forgot they had been married at all. They forgot that they had children waiting at home. Layered on top of the shocks came the drugs, powerful sedatives and hallucinogens, including LSD, used not to comfort, but to strip away whatever was left of the person's grip on themselves. And Cameron kept pushing until his patients reached what he considered success. That success looked like this: a grown adult who could no longer feed themselves, who had lost control of their own bladder, who lay in bed sucking their thumb, babbling, unable to remember a single fact about who they had been. He believed he had wound them all the way back to infancy, a blank human being. To him, that ruined, helpless state wasn't a tragedy. It was the whole point. Step 1 complete. Then came step 2. And step 2 is where it stops sounding like medicine at all. Once the mind had been scraped clean, Cameron needed to write something new onto it. His method for that was called psychic driving. He would keep the patient in a state of drug-induced sleep, sometimes for weeks or even months on end. And while they lay there, unconscious or barely aware, he played them a recording, a short message, a single spoken statement, sometimes about their problems, sometimes a simple instruction about how they should feel or behave. And that message did not play once. It looped, over and over. Some patients had a single sentence played to them tens of thousands of times. 250,000 repetitions in some accounts, piped in through speakers or through helmets fixed over their heads or through pillows wired for sound. He was treating a human being like a tape machine. Erase the old recording, then run the new one until it sticks. He wasn't talking to these people, he was overwriting them. Some accounts describe patients so desperate to escape the endless voice that they had to be paralyzed with drugs so they couldn't tear the equipment away. They lay there, unable to move, while the sentence repeated in the dark for the 10,000th time, the 20,000th. And when it was all over, when the shocks stopped and the tapes fell silent and they were finally allowed to wake, many of them never came back. Not all the way. Not the person who had walked in. These were not hardened criminals or spies. They were ordinary Canadians. A young mother named Jean-Charles Paget, a woman named Velma Orlico who had gone in for depression after childbirth, a man named Robert Logie, people with jobs and homes and anniversaries. They had come to the best hospital they could find, complaining of things we would now consider minor. Postpartum sadness, anxiety, exhaustion, aching joints that a doctor thought might be in the mind. They left as strangers to their own lives. Some could no longer recognize their own husbands or wives. Some had lost the memory of their children so completely that the kids became small strangers living in their house. Some had forgotten how to cook, how to drive, how to do the everyday things a person does without thinking. There were reports of adults who had to be toilet trained again, like toddlers. The gaps in memory, for many, never filled back in. Whole years of their lives were simply gone and stayed gone until the day they died. They had entered as people with problems. They came out as raw material from an experiment that had failed to build anything at all. For years, none of them knew what had really been done to them or why. They only knew that they had gone to a hospital and lost themselves inside it. The truth came out slowly and only in fragments. Cameron's role at the Allen Memorial ended in the mid-1960s, and he died a few years later. It was only in the following decade, when the existence of mkultra was dragged into the light through American investigations, that the Montreal experiments surfaced with a paper trail attached. But by then, the trail had already been set on fire. Because when mkultra's own director sensed the program might one day be exposed, he gave an order: destroy the records. And they did. The bulk of the mkultra files were deliberately shredded, leaving only scraps, financial documents that survived by accident in the wrong filing cabinet, which means no one can ever say for certain how many people Cameron ran through his machine. The best estimates count into the hundreds who passed through his depatterning and psychic driving. But the true number of minds altered, damaged, or emptied out on those beds is a figure that was intentionally burned so that no one could ever add it up. A handful of the victims fought back. 9 of them, including Velma Orlico, sued the CIA in an American court. The case was known as Orlico versus the United States. It dragged on for years, and in 1988, the agency settled. A payment quietly divided among the survivors, with the government careful to admit as little as it possibly could. No trial, no full accounting, no one held to answer. The hospital still stands on the slope of Mount Royal, treating patients to this day. Somewhere in the record is a woman who went in with the ordinary sadness that comes after a baby is born and woke weeks later not knowing she had ever had a child. She spent the rest of her life with a hole where those years should have been, listening, somewhere in the back of her mind, for a sentence she could almost, but never quite, remember. That's as far as the paper trail goes. The rest got classified, redacted, or quietly lost. Make of that what you will. Thanks for sitting with me in the dark a while. There's always another file they would rather stayed buried, so keep asking the questions, and I'll see you on the next one.